the way we have to go if we're going to recognize the reality of today's families. Or we can ignore the reality of today's families and continue not serving those 3- and 4-year-olds at the single most critical time in their young lives.
Okay, we'll continue with rebuttal. You may go.
Again, I don't disagree with the notion of standards. I do disagree with the state supporting those standards or creating those standards. And I do disagree that the bills do not create a stream for funding. Senator Heiderprim, I invite everyone in the audience to look at the 2010 proposed legislation, and you'll see for yourself that there is language in the bill that very clearly sets the stage for state funding. And if you want to defer funding away from the K-12 system and toward pre-K or add to the state burden, then I disagree.
Okay, very good. Lieutenant Governor, we'll continue with you. You'll go first with this next question. South Dakota continues to be at the bottom of the list for average teacher salaries. How can South Dakota continue to compete regionally to recruit and retain high qualified teachers when we are falling further and further behind our regional neighbors in terms of teacher salaries? Is it your goal to finally move us up the list after being at the bottom for 25 years?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the study to which you're referring is a study that's generated by the National Education Association. It's the teachers' union. And I don't begrudge them their wish to produce material which encourages states, including South Dakota, to raise teachers' salaries. I don't begrudge the education community from advocating for more money for K-12 education. But I think it's important to look at it as it is. It is just simply a number, and it makes no adjustment for a cost of living or for tax burden. If I'm going to be paid the same amount of money in Minnesota as I am in South Dakota, I'm staying here because I know the tax burden in Minnesota is much higher. If I'm going to be paid the same amount of money as a teacher in South Dakota as I am in Nebraska, I'll stay in South Dakota because I know the cost of living is higher in Nebraska. When you adjust most or many industries or salary groups in South Dakota for cost of living, adjusted for tax, the disposable income after tax, adjusted for cost of living, we fall about the middle of the pack.
All right, we'll throw it to you, Senator. Again, is it your goal to finally move us up the list after being at the bottom for 25 years in regards to teacher pay?
Thank you, Stephanie. I listened carefully to the Lieutenant Governor's answer, and I guess his answer is he thinks things are just fine the way they are, because I didn't hear a proposal for changing the way in which we value educators. He'll have a minute in rebuttal, and I sincerely hope you address that. Let me tell you, we're dead last. In fact, the state that's nearest to us is North Dakota, and they're $3,000 on average ahead of us. Even when you adjust the number for taxes, we're dead last. Now, how do we go about changing it? It is fundamental to my plan, 3 steps. We have to reduce the size of the bureaucracy. David Knutson and I came with a proposal that was rejected by the Lieutenant Governor and other Republicans that simply would have reduced the size of government by 2 or 3% and generated $10 to $20 million. That money, once saved, needs to be regenerated toward education and reinvested. We're going to send $10.5 million to TransCanada under the large energy project sales tax rebate. It's a total waste of money. That is a company that is putting crude oil pipelines under South Dakota, that never asked for an incentive, would have done it anyway, concedes that point, and still, though we asked the legislature to stop giving money to TransCanada on that basis, we insisted on doing it again this year to the tune of $10.5 million. Think of what our education community could do with $10.5 million. We couldn't even get 3.8 past this session.
Okay, we'll have time for rebuttal. Lieutenant Governor.
As governor, the first dollars that we have in our budget will go to education, and the last dollars will too. We face some budget problems in the years ahead. In this year ahead, we face some challenges. We hope that the recession will improve and our economy will do better. In the years ahead, I'm confident South Dakota will emerge from this recession and have the resources to do not just the funding formula, but additional dollars for education. And through that means, we hope to give local school boards the authority to offer salaries that are competitive in the marketplace. The state does not set teacher salaries, local school boards do. They do it with the resources that are available to them, from property taxes, from the school funding formula, and from other funding sources that they may have. They react to the marketplace and they use their money prudently to hire teachers at the best value they can get.
Okay, we'll continue with rebuttal, Senator.
Thank you. Again, I listened carefully to the Lieutenant Governor's answer, and I didn't hear a plan for increasing pay for teachers. I must assume from two opportunities to do that there isn't one on the other side. There's a very clear one on this side. A, we need to examine the bill passed by the Congress just 2 days ago for $26 million additional dollars just for teachers. B, we need to reduce the size of state government. We all know that state government has grown way beyond the population of the state of South Dakota. We have to reduce it by having discipline on top and imposing that discipline below. Remember, the growth in state government has nothing to do with K-12 education. In fact, Senator Knutson and I, when we made our proposal to reduce the size of state government, excluded K-12 and Medicaid. So those bugaboos have been taken off the table. State government must be reduced in size so that we can reinvest in K-12 education and look to the future of this state.
All right, very good. We'll move to the next question. Senator, you'll begin. This week, the Congress approved a package of funding for states and K-12 schools, which includes approximately $26 million to help South Dakota schools avoid budget cuts and teacher layoffs. If you become governor, would you accept the federal funding? And how would you make sure the money is distributed to schools and not used to balance the state's budget or backfill the state's budget reserve?
That's one thing that the statute is very clear about. It cannot be used for overall debt reduction in the state. It must be used for education, specifically for teachers. I invite you to all, you probably have read it, you probably got copies of it distributed to you over the last 2 days. It's a very encouraging piece of legislation. I find it ironic that this administration expresses reluctance about this, even though it's paid for, it doesn't increase the deficit, and we do it by closing that loophole that benefits the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. This is an administration that accepted all of the revitalization dollars, $250 million of it to balance the budget over the last 3 years. This administration accepted $183 million earmarked for roads and bridges in the state of South Dakota. But when it comes to education, this administration says no. Strings attached, we don't want it. Well, I disagree. Unfortunately, there is a means under the bill for you to make direct application around an administration that is going to do nothing for you and go directly for applications for the dollars. They're still working on the rules about that process, but it's very clear that they anticipated just such an approach by some states, and they want to get the dollars into the school districts as quickly as they can.
All right, again, this will go to you, Lieutenant Governor, and I'll just restate it. If you become governor, would you accept the federal funding, and how would you make sure the money is distributed to schools and not used to balance the state's budget or backfill the state's budget reserves?
Well, as I said earlier, I think it's too early to say whether the funding should be accepted. I think it depends upon the strings that are attached. Senator Heidepen claims that there are no strings attached. He apparently can see through to the regulations that are going to be adopted, even though they have not yet been adopted. He apparently has more confidence in the regulatory agencies of our federal government, and that those regulations will be crafted in such a way as to benefit South Dakota and not force us into spending patterns that are actually detrimental to our economy and to our fiscal responsibility. So I am unwilling to say that I will accept that money and spend it without knowing first what strings are attached. And I think that's good government.
All right, very good. We will have some time for rebuttal. Senator, would you like to rebuttal?
Thank you, Stephanie. The issue isn't that I have more confidence in the rulemaking authority in Washington. The issue is why you have so little confidence in education. in the application of $26 million and 500 positions throughout this great state of South Dakota to supply educators from Scotland and Sioux Falls to Harding County and Hot Springs and Sisseton. Why we don't avail ourselves of that and at the same time close a cost